Greetings to everyone, my name is Syroyid. I'm professor of music education, doctor of musicology, pianist and composer, and in today's video we'll be looking at one of the most iconic works of the piano repertoire that became very popular through the orchestration of Maurice Ravel. This is Tableau d'une exposition, or Pictures at an Exhibition, by Modest Mussorgsky. Right, actually, well, the piece is extensive, so it features 10 separate numbers and has this promenade, which is like an introduction. What we'll be doing in today's video is to just focus on the first promenade, and if you really enjoy this piece and you will like it, please let me know in the comments so I can forward this to you. We're gonna be starting with the analysis. The analysis is gonna be featuring firstly a structural explanation of this first movement, and then we'll enter the harmonic and melodic details. So let's start playing, and as I play I'll be telling the different parts that we're having here as a fragmentation. So be the first phrase that actually has this call and answer, call and response. Right, we had a similar structure, and then that's the beginning of something new. Right, clearly that's one phrase. Next. And then we have this one. And here we're entering probably a phrase that's halfway through because it's very similar to the one that follows. This is sort of a false recapitulation. That consists of repeating the same motif, and then we have the recapitulation. After that follows directly the first number, which is No. Right, it's very interesting and very asymmetrical, one must say. When we look into it, there are multiple ways that we can structure it, but certainly there is something that we can call section A. And there is a very strong sense of recapitulation here. So we're getting section A prime. Now, what happens in the middle is another story, but the first thing that I would like to draw your attention to is that in the second half of the page, and I know I'm not using an Urtext edition because the only available one is the Baron Writer and it's copyrighted, so I didn't want to have any copyright infringement. But in this edition in particular, they are following correctly the time signature changes, so all of the second page is in fact in one single time signature, but in the beginning we have this alternation between 5/4 and 6/4, which in reality creates this sense of 11/4, where it's very asymmetrical what we're having. So having said this, there are multiple ways we can analyze this first phrase. Maybe we could even make the analysis by groups of two. And clearly, for me, there is something different starting here. Right, which becomes for me this section B that's repeated again. And then you have, and then we have this sort of development, sequential passage. And the third idea there. So probably all of this would be the three parts that section B has. We have a section B1 with these phrases. Then we have a section B2, which has a different material. Section B2. And finally, we have section B3. So these are the three sections that B has. Now, these three sections that we have in B are particularly contrasting because they have different melodic and rhythmic profiles. You have this, whereas the other one is, and the third one is a scale. And after that, well, we go back to A. So now A as such, which is the section A, also can be divided into different parts or phrases. So maybe what we'll do is, in order to distinguish the main sections, we would use this darker hue of green and write a double bar to specify this sectional division. And within A, well, A prime, I think it's quite clear that we have two phrases. So we have, and then it's repeated again. So that sort of structure is at the beginning, and then you have so we have basically two separate A's. We have one A1, which has this phrase, and then we have A2, section A2, which is made of the following two phrases. Now this is starting to make more sense. So we have two phrases. Section A2 is also two phrases. And B1 is two phrases. B2, apparently two, so we'll be getting there, but these are two phrases. Here, B3 clearly is, because you have this repetition here with an extension, and A2 prime is also two phrases. So each of these sections is basically structured into phrases, although they are very asymmetrical. So it's not like one single 4 and 2+2 organization, but it's much more complicated, as we'll be seeing it now. So that's going to be like the overview. Now let's dive in and try to make sense of the first two phrases that make section A1. So that's two phrases, 2 bars each, which is equal to 4 bars. So the first thing that we have is this opening, which is monody, right? And needless to say, it's probably one of the most iconic openings that, well, in Ravel's orchestration sounds with the trumpet. And it has this sort of, I mean, it's not complete, but it has sort of a mirror structure in which we have an opening idea that's descending second in a fourth. And now this opening idea is transformed into another continuation that's fragmented. And that fragmentation is repeated. And then we have this sort of inversion and extended inversion of the opening idea. It's clearly there, and then we have the F once more. So that last F, it's probably the one that breaks the symmetry and makes well, the phrase a little bit asymmetrical. But you can also integrate it as part of this motif as an extension. So inside we have this sort of ABB, BA pattern, which is quite symmetrical, but at the same time it's not a perfect symmetry. So there is this idea of the mirror structure, but asymmetrical. And what we have is a motif. Both A and B consist of fourth and second. So A is a descending second followed by an ascending fourth, whereas B is an ascending fourth followed by this descending third. But the third is one way to look into it. Another way to look into it is as a second that's from there. So clearly the motion is ascending and then descending. You have this descending third. And the second time we have A prime, it's an inversion. So A prime, for instance, is ascending second and a descending fourth. So clearly there is a lot of motivic logic and structure into this opening. It's not a random opening that just presents a catchy tune, but it's a melody it has a very strong logic, inner logic. And that inner logic is what's guiding it and making it sound so good. At the same time, it's in a singable range, so it's in a range of an octave, which makes it very convenient for the voice, human voice. But if we connect all of these notes together, we get a quite unusual scale by the time, because it's a pentatonic scale. It's F, G, B flat, C, D. And that's the pentatonic scale of B flat major. Now, the pentatonic major scale usually is presented with a root, like that. But in this case, we're having it starting on the fifths. So by doing so in a way, what we're doing is a mixolydian mode, because if you remember the modes, the tonic mode is the Ionian, the dominant mode is the mixolydian. And by having this pentatonic in the fifth transposition, which has the F as its main note, it creates a sense of mixolydian scale. So you have this mixolydian feel. And the mixolydian feel is really enhanced when we have a B flat. But if you look at it, in order to avoid it, this is all harmonized as F major. So that's the unusual thing. You would have F major with a pentatonic of B flat. And the normal thing would be to have B flat pentatonic and have it in the key of B flat. So in reality, the pentatonic is of B flat, but the scale it's F major. I mean, it sounds a mixolydian because that's what we would expect if we would have the F flat, but in reality, it's harmonized as an F major. So we have this harmonization that's completely F major. So I would say that, yeah, from the beginning, we could argue that there is this F major because there are no flats. And that means that we can analyze all of the following harmonic progression from the key of F major. That means this is the second degree, that's the first degree, first inversion, again second degree, first degree, first inversion. Well, first degree root position. Then we have the sixth degree. Then we again have the first, fourth, second. And then we have the dominant, first inversion, and tonic. Now this dominant and first inversion, it's really not a structural one. The structural one is the previous. And also here, we could see a cadence. So the cadence for me would be this. Right, so here we're having a perfect authentic cadence in F major. And what we have at the beginning, it's really a prolongation of the tonic. So the important degrees from the structural point of view would be the F major. And the second degree, it's just a neighbor tone that we're having. So we have this sort of, well, firstly, it's like an appoggiatura, then it's a passing tone. And this is a substitute. Right, so that would be a very tonal interpretation of this. And we would have here a prolongation. And there we would have a cadence. So this is cadential progression, and this is a prolongation, harmonic prolongation. So that would be the way to look into it from the tonal perspective. The thing that happens is that it doesn't really sound tonal. When we listen to it, we don't feel so much the F major here, but rather we feel that we're in sort of a G not Dorian, G Aeolian mode. So we're like in this G. And then we go to B flat. So another harmonic interpretation, because this is one from F major, which could make sense just from the melodic sense, is this other one. So let's put it. We are in G Aeolian or G minor. It's G minor, natural. But since it's natural, I like to call it Aeolian. So in G Aeolian, we have the tonic that goes to the 7th degree, the subtonic. That's creating the cadence, right? So I'll put it here. That's the G Aeolian feel. And after that, I'm not sure how to best put it here. So let's put it maybe this way. And I'll remove the F major here because it's not really telling us much. So let me remove this. And put the G, yeah, that's working better. So we have the G Aeolian, it's one subtonic, tonic, and then we have again this subtonic, and that goes to the minor dominant, right? So this all sounds like in G. And then we're in this perfect cadence to B flat. So that's the perfect cadence to B flat. That's also worth mentioning. So it sounds like we have a 5-1 in B flat. And after that, we have the perfect cadence in F major. So those will be my interpretations. There's a third interpretation that we could make, and it's to think of D minor as an actual point of arrival, in which case we would have the D Aeolian, but it's a cadence of 3-2-1. So clearly, by avoiding the functional harmony at the beginning and starting in this inversion, which is a transposition, this is the dominant transposition. What Mussorgsky achieves is this sort of folkloric, traditional folk music sound. And it's also creating a lot of harmonic ambiguity. So, of course, the harmony is a triadic harmony. So what we have, it's just normal triads. But the way they are connected, it's not in the traditional functional sense. And by doing this, we arrive at these unpredictable sequences of chords. Which at the same time sound very modern, because, for instance, this B flat major, yes, but if we return back to G, this sounds G Dorian. And this could be in G Dorian, we have this tonic, minor tonic that goes to the 4th degree. And then we eventually have the F major with the 5 that goes to 1. And by doing this, it's full of color. It's full of harmonic changes and nuances, right? And here, clearly, what we have is a repetition of the melody. I mean, the melody is played exactly the same. So we have the same motifs. I could highlight them. I mean, since he'll be developing them further, we can just remain with these colors throughout. So we have this exact same motif, but the harmonization is also having a little melody in the bass. So we have this. The beginning is pentatonic. Right? So we have this D pentatonic scale, D minor pentatonic. But then he introduces the B flat. And that's very tonal. That's a very tonal ending. So it's a 2-5-1. But here we have this modality, and I think that the pentatonic, D minor pentatonic, creates this very interesting and unique sound when harmonizing the bass melody. So we'll put it with maybe pink as our D minor pentatonic. Good. So now the A2, it's based on the same motifs, but it's a different melody. A1 was. Whereas A2 it sounds like a presentation and a continuation. So maybe instead of looking into it as two separate sections, you could also see everything as a very long musical sentence that has the opening idea repeated. So we have this basic idea, 2 bars, plus basic idea and chords. That's the 2 bars. Then we have a continuation, 2 bars, and then we have the modulating cadence. Although it's not really a cadence, it's more of a half cadence that we have. Right, it's a half cadence. So you could see modulating half cadence. You could see all of it as a very long 8-bar. It's going to be an A major sentence. And it's a modulating sentence. Modulating sentence that is made of A1, which is this basic idea that's repeated with chords. And then we have A2, which is the continuation. It's a slightly contrasting idea that is followed by this half cadence. Right, I'll remove the top text because it's a little bit taking space and it's going to be important for the analysis that we're having. So let's remove it. So now, as we can see, rather than probably seeing these as phrases, we can see this larger modulating sentence, and inside each of these sections can be seen as small periods. So we have here one period that's made of these 2 presentations and another period. So if we were to look into it as a period, we would have the opening and then the contrasting idea, opening and contrasting idea, but they're extremely short. So probably I wouldn't try to make sense of these as periods due to their length and see it all as a very long 8 bars modulating sentence, right? So now we're in the second part of the sentence. So if the first part of the sentence is A1, that's the antecedent. The A2 is the consequent. What we're having with the antecedent and the consequent is a modulation to the key of D flat major. So that's extremely modern. If you think about it, the pieces in B flat, the first thing we had is a modulation to F major, and it sounds all like an F major or through these different modes. But the next bit is even more surprising because it doesn't go to F major, which is dominant, but it goes to the dominant of D flat major, right? So it's the half cadence on D flat major, which actually goes to this A flat. Right, so let's see how this is organized. First, we have the motif. So the motivic analysis is telling us that we have the yellow. Now it's presented with the inverted pattern. So becomes. And then Mussorgsky is developing that same thing by diminution. So we have the same pattern, but it's faster. So that's where the diminution comes from, is this rhythm that we had. But at the same time, it's a different intervallic presentation. So we have a fifth, and here we have a third, right? And that's the modulation or transformation, intervallic transformation that we have from the fourth. So first he extends, and then he contracts. And after that, we have that is very similar to the sort of ending we had before, very pentatonic. But at the same time, rhythmically, it's novel, because rhythmically we didn't have any other combination that sounded like this. So we could be seeing this motif as a combination of both, like an overlap. There is this yellow one, I mean, it's the same as there. And I'll highlight it here too. And then we have the orange, which is overlapping together. And well, these are the different instances. So that is a point where both motifs are connected. Now, in the bass, we also have this sort of intervallic motion. It's a fourth, and then we have that third. Fourth and third was exactly the thing we had here in B. Right? So we're getting to see the same rhythm as the yellow one, but it's the motif of the orange one. So probably I would more likely connect it to the orange one. So this is an orange by extension. And if we look closer, I think this motif isn't new. We had it before too. Right? So maybe the best way to highlight it could be, since we're focusing on the qualities that are not rhythmic, maybe we can give it a separate color. We'll give it maybe a little bit of blue. So the blue is the one that we'll be talking about when we have the interval of a fourth that goes up and a third that goes down. It's exactly here, it's here, and it's also appearing in these instances. However, we're losing it afterwards, so we're not having that motif anymore. So it's fourth, and it's also here. So that's what explains the harmonic choice that he has. And it's very interesting because we're starting with F. And in reality, by doing this, what he is creating, the extensions that we're having here, is the motif A. So motif A was, and now we have, right. So these three notes, which will give a green arrow, are really extremely important from the structural point of view because they are motif A transposed. And I guess, well, the more we look into it, the more we'll see all of this interlocked motivic logic that's guiding this piece, and it's, well, explaining most of it. Because if you're seeing that we'll have a fourth and a third, this is a third, it goes to a fourth, so it's all very, very connected. Right, and probably since this was motivic, I would put this color here, and when I'm having the orange, and I'll put it maybe above, I'm talking about the rhythm. So the rhythm is the orange. Let's see. So we have there, and that's rhythm of 2/8 and 1/4. I'll put it so we don't confuse them with letters. So that's the rhythm. Now, this is the first time. The second time that he presents it, it's like this A flat Lydian movement. So you could connect all of this as an A flat Lydian. And it's going up. So we have this D, E flat, A flat. I think we haven't seen exactly the same intervallic motion. We saw other ones, but it's making a lot of sense to have this ascending motion here as an answer to that descending motion. Right, so in a way there is this mirror, and I would like to highlight it. Let's see if we can get it properly. So we have this D, E flat, A flat, which is the same as this E flat, D flat, A flat. But it's sounding in A flat Lydian. Right, now going back to this, it's F major pentatonic. And in this case, it's in root position. So notice how this pentatonic scale, it's different from, that was the B flat pentatonic that he was using in an inversion. And now this one is an F pentatonic. Now, what is the difference between the F pentatonic and the B flat pentatonic? It's one note, is the A. So F major pentatonic is this. B flat pentatonic is this. So we're moving from this to with that note. Now, the next one that we have here, it's A flat. So we're moving to A flat pentatonic. Right, so the melody is first in F pentatonic and then it's in A flat pentatonic. And in order to do this, he has this little moment of A flat Lydian. Right. You could call it Lydian because it's on A flat and that's the main key. Right. And that's how we arrived there. Now, the only chords that happened to be are these, and they are, again, not very functional because you have the tonic. Then you have this fourth degree, which is like a sort of neighbor tone harmony, but really it's a prolongation of the tonic. So we have a prolongation of tonic. But really it's not any cadence. So, I mean, if you want to look at it as a cadence, it's a very modern sounding cadence. And really the cadence, we had it here. That one really sounded like a cadence. So the next one is a prolongation of the A flat. Right? And it's one of these passages where Mussorgsky is just copying and pasting the same music. So you're having here the F major passage, which is all of this. And now all of this passage is just being copied and pasted down here. So maybe I could highlight it like this. And right here, that's the same thing. If we're looking at it from A flat, we're having tonic, fourth degree, second degree, and then tonic. Now, how do we explain A flat and F major? Well, F major is the dominant of B flat, and A flat is the the dominant of D flat. Now, what is D flat? We're in B flat major. We would need to go to B flat minor and look at its relative. So really what he is doing is the relative of the parallel key, right? We can put it relative RP, that means relative of the parallel key. That's what D flat is. So D flat major is relative parallel of B flat. And these sorts of Riemannian modulations by medians, so we're going from B flat to D flat to F, it's very common of modern music that you would see in Liszt and so forth. And in this case, I mean, this modernism is very present. And bear in mind that Mussorgsky was extremely critical with his pieces, and I mean, he didn't produce an immense amount of works. He has a very limited amount of works. But the ones that we have, in particular this one, are really great examples of harmonic exploration. And this harmonic exploration can just be seen by this section A, where we've moved to F, we moved to A flat, but in theory we're in B flat major because we started with the B flat major pentatonic scale. So let's move forward. Now we have section B1. So section B1 sounds like this. Right? So I would say that still we're not really feeling B flat at all as the main key. Really, B flat is sort of appearing to be happening very late in the piece, but here this doesn't sound as B flat. It rather sounds like A flat major. Right, so we're in this sort of, you either want to look at it as A flat mixolydian, because we end on A flat. But for me, it still sounds very tonal, and I would argue that it's D flat major, and we're just doing another half cadence on D flat. Right, which is the same thing that was happening here. So now we have a half cadence on D flat, and then we have a half cadence on F major. So these are the two half cadences that are happening. Half cadence of D flat major, and then half cadence of F major. When we look at the melody that is happening, there is this sort of very asymmetrical and interesting structure, because you have something that clearly sounds like an opening basic idea. You have this basic idea, and then it's repeated twice. And then we have this continuation or contrasting idea. So it clearly behaves a little bit like a period. In this case, I think it's really clean and clear. So we have this period of two phrases, made of two phrases of 5 bars. Now, why is it 5 bars? This is the first thing that we want to look. In the way that Mussorgsky writes this, sounds like you have the D flat major key. Right, that's the D flat dominant scale, the mixolydian. And now he continues with D flat. And it's like, it sounds like, oh, I made a mistake. And I need to go and do it properly in the right key. So directly we have the actual beginning. So it's like a false entrance. This is the one that's in the right key. And it behaves like a sequence. So you have this as a reference or modal. And here we have a repetition, third above. And I think that this disruption that you have here, it's one of the most innovative key changes. So it's a very abrupt key change. In this moment, directly for some reason, Mussorgsky decides to break and forget about this and do. And to make it even more disruptive, he omits one beat. So it's 5 beats instead of 6. The original one was 6. And now we have. And that's the same thing that we had before. So this is section B1. Usually people play this mezzo forte, and some editions that write it, Mussorgsky, didn't specify any dynamic. In the Urtex edition, the only dynamic we see is forte at the very beginning, and that seems to be the case in this edition by Lam too. But the orchestration, sometimes they move here to strings, and Ravel is lowering the dynamic and then doing a little crescendo, progressive crescendo. This section B1 motivically is based very strongly on the very same foundations that we saw before. So let's see what are those motifs. We had, on the one hand, we have this. That's a neighbor tone. Where did that neighbor tone appear? It's part of this bass that we were hearing at the beginning. So maybe we can highlight it. Here we had it. So it's that bass now becomes a motif. So that's the bass line of A. Then we have an inversion in the left hand. So in reality, it's like a very strong counterpoint, because you have this inversion that's augmented and it's kind of similar but contrasting. So this is the inversion. And that's basically the main rhythm, because what happens after that, it's this very same inversion, because that's a sequence. And then we have this of A1. Now, the next motif is based on this motif of the thirds, second and the third. Let's see where we can find it. That's with the fourth. So I won't make it. There we have a clearly descending fourth in a second, and before that we have this. And I think that sounds quite new, because we didn't have this exact presentation. We had maybe inversions of it. And this second with the third sounds very similar to the beginning. But it's a different motif. Probably that's the closest we can have, because here we have this third that goes down and then a descending second, and now it's just the opposite. Right? And why is this so coherent? Why do we have so many references or self-references? Because Mussorgsky was conscientiously employing two concepts here. The first concept is to use a motif that's very characteristic. Intervallically, this motif, it's a second and a fourth, which already sounds like a cadence to B flat, right? Although it's not harmonized like that. It has this interrupted cadence in that D minor, right? But by doing this and thinking of the pentatonic scales and these harmonies that are like stronger or more disruptive, he achieves a very coherent and highly coherent piece, where there is a lot of cohesion because the motifs are very, very similar between themselves. So we saw this reference of the blue, and then if we look at the ending, you had this ending. So and that's the same motif as this. After that, we have the scale, and I think this is one of the most classical counterpoints because it's perfect contrary motion, works very well. You have this ascending line in the top, you have the descending in the bass, and then it's the opposite, right? So we have the descending in the top and the ascending in the bass. In the same way as we started with that neighbor tone or undulation, we end. So we have right, this is a double neighbor tone, and it's based on this motif, which clearly resembles many of the structures we saw before, like those ones that have the third and the second, right? So that's what's happening here, and really the very surprising thing is how it's behaving. So you have this as a reference, right? So it's starting here, and it's all in this reference in B flat. So I'll move the reference text here above. It's reference in B flat. No, sorry, in D flat, reference in D flat, and then the reference in D flat becomes a repetition and F. So it's the opposite way that we had it before. Repetition and F. If you look at section A, it's first in F. So we have F, and then we had the D flat. But now it's first D flat, and then it's F. And by doing this, well, it's like going back to the journey that we started with. But still, the surprising thing is that, well, we didn't have the B flat major established. So we didn't hear any B flat whatsoever so far, and we're quite far in the piece. So more things about this. Well, this bar, that's the disruption, so it's like the false entrance, and I would highlight it because it's shorter. It has 5 beats. It has this key change, and it's probably one of these most modernistic sounds that we have. So that's what happens. Right, harmonically we didn't analyze it, so let's briefly put it. It's a dominant 7th with first inversion. You could even argue that it's a 9th because you have the B flat that goes to tonic and first inversion. Then we're going to the 2nd degree, but I would like to think of all of that as the dominant 9th. This goes to the tonic, first inversion. That's the dominant 2nd inversion, and tonic first, tonic root. Then we have the 2nd degree root position, first inversion tonic, dominant 7th, 6th degree, which is neighbor, clearly neighbor, and we have this. So the half cadence is established by having the tonic, a prolongation of the tonic, and a dominant. That's what's really happening here, because these dominants that are happening in between and the 2nd degree aren't that important. So all you have is a tonic function that goes to the dominant here. And at the beginning, it's rather than a tonic that goes to the dominant, it's a prolongation of the dominant. So he's standing on this dominant. Now we have tonic, dominant. And by doing dominant, tonic, dominant, in reality, all we do is we just stand on the dominant and we have this tonic rather as some sort of neighbor tone. It's like that. So the real harmony is a prolongation of the dominant, and that dominant continues. So we have just the A flat dominant, and then we have this C, that's the F dominant of F major. So C dominant, that's the dominant of F major. Right, section B2. Section B2, it's a new one, and sounds like this. And probably rather than putting the bar where I've put it, it's here where we should have it. And it's a place where both sections begin and end. So that sort of F has two functions. It's the end of B2 and the beginning of B3. Seeing this, now we can, well, try to make sense of this. Clearly there is the motif that we were, rhythmic motif, the orange one. So let's put it back. The orange motif is there. And it's appearing in different parts. And then the rest seems to be based on the more melodic motion that we had. So that's the fourth and the second. Then we have the fifth. Right? And all of this really sounds like we're leaning too much on the D, and probably because this shouldn't be viewed probably as F major. We'll see what it could be. But these cadences for me definitely sound like we're in G. And not any G, but some sort of G Dorian. We're in G Dorian, so that's not a B flat major. So in G Dorian, which is the second degree of F major, G Dorian is the scale that has G, A, well, it's G minor with the raised sharp or raised 6. So we have the raised 6th degree. The 6th degree, raised 6, is E natural, and E natural is appearing here. Also, it's getting in different places. But really what sounds, or what the sound that we're getting is this A, which in D Dorian would be the 2nd degree, and that goes to the 3rd, B flat. But then quickly it becomes this sequence of 7 that goes to tonic with the 6th. 7th that goes to the tonic with the added 6. And then we have the dominant minor that goes to the tonic with the added 7th, dominant to tonic added 7th, and so forth. Now, for me, these chords are not as structurally important. What we're having is more or less the prolongation of the G chord. And here the same happens with these. You could even interpret the first chord as possibly a substitute. It's a substitute of the actual G minor that is supposed to happen. So let's see why this moved. I've added the brackets and it's making this, it shifted a little bit. Right, so this could be a substitution. And the substitution is B flat for G. And I really like the asymmetrical property of this, because by placing it here, it's unpredictable. If Mussorgsky wouldn't have added this motif here, it would become very symmetrical. But he's doing, which creates some sort of Emiola feel, because it's like something is starting there, but well, it's not really full. And by throwing that rhythm, and this is particularly important for composers, you're creating a much more interesting texture. Bear in mind that the entire movement is just composed with quarter notes and eighth notes, but still it's extremely interesting, as we can see through this analysis. So the bass, it's sort of an inversion of second and fourth. Now it's that yellow motif inverted, so I'll put it here, the inversion of A. And then we have the our famous purple motif, which is the neighbor tone. The neighbor tone clearly begins here with the F too, so you could probably combine them all and see them as this motif and that one. There is something about this that resembles a little bit, or you have this fourth. That was a scene from A flat, right? So Here, I would argue that that fourth is basically part of the opening idea. Basic idea. And all of this sounds very modal. And could it be viewed from the key of F major? Yes, but that would mean that we're viewing everything as the prolongation of the second degree of F major, or directly, or G Dorian, which is G minor. So that's the prolongation that we're having here. The important note clearly is G. After that, we have this. Still G. So the prolongation continues. Let's now see how this can be explained. From the key of G, that's the fourth degree. That becomes major fourth. And then that goes to the seventh. And that goes to the tonic. All of these are transitory chords. So we have them again here. And finally we arrive there to the tonic. Now, this is where the Dorian starts to be played with Aeolian. So we have both. E flat is Aeolian. And when you hear the E natural, is the Dorian. So in a way, Mussorgsky is sounding a little bit jazzy. And it's true because in jazz music, we tend to have these. And it does sound a little bit like a cadence to F major. Right. So at the same time that we're losing and moving away from the sonority of the G Dorian. So this is the G Dorian Aeolian. So as we're moving away from that, we're starting to sound also a little bit like F major. And in F major, this would be the minor dominant that goes to the major dominant that goes to the tonic. That's a cadence. Then we have the second degree with seventh and a repetition of that. So clearly the cadences make more sense because if you look into them, this is where it ends. So we end with the dominant, the tonic with a 6 at 6, the dominant and the tonic there. So I would rather view it as F major. And the cadences are asymmetrical. They are not starting where they should. So you can see one is doing this. The next one is here. The third one is there. And then we have a fourth one here, which is the shortest. Actually, it starts with here. So we had all of this prolongation of the subdominant, or, well, not actually the subdominant, it's the predominant function. And now we have these perfect cadences on the dominant or F major. So it's the cadences on dominant. And when we have so many cadences on the dominant, we usually talk of standing on the dominant. But I think that concept is much more clearer here when we arrive to this moment. So that was the culmination, in my opinion, because it's the climax before the recapitulation. And what Mussorgsky is doing, it's a standing on the dominant. So we previously had all of these perfect cadences on the dominant. Now we're standing on the dominant. And finally, for the first time, it's harmonized in B flat major. So this theme eventually is harmonized in B flat major, finally, because prior to that we didn't hear it. So just summarizing, we had the pentatonic of B flat, but it was F. F moved to D flat. D flat then stayed, moved back to F. So that's like the first half of the piece, I would say. And then the second half, which starts in section B2, is the predominant extension, the dominant extension with perfect cadences, and B3, which is ascending on the dominant, right? So what is this sounding like? Well, it's scales. It's the scales. We didn't have many scales. I mean, you could connect them with a purple motif nonetheless, so we'll use this. You can clearly see how these scales will arise from neighbor tones that we're having. So this is one of them. That's another. This is another. And that's yet another. So all of these are kind of neighbor tones. And the neighbor tone is, this is the genius of Mussorgsky, that the neighbor tone happens to be also connected with the opening motif that we had at the beginning. Right. So there it's sounding here. And the orange is the one that makes reference to these motifs that we have there. Right, so they're appearing like this, interlocked. You have a lot of that here, and also a neighbor tone that's connecting, which is that one. Right, so that would be the motivic level. Now this scale, it's also taken from the scales that we had first here. All right, so we are now looking into section B3. The scales that we are seeing here, the scale motif, is clearly prominent, so I would give it this pink color. And it's something that kind of inspires all of this. So we had it. Right, that sort of scales that are an inversion. So I would connect this B3 in a sort of recapitulation, or it's a development of B1. So the first time we hear B1, there's a presentation. We have the neighbor tones, and then scales. And now it's the opposite. Right, so we have here are the neighbor tones, there are the scales. And that's basically what justifies most of what we're hearing. So we hear the scales are starting here, and then they're leading there. Now, the way this is written, and because so many things happen to be on F as the main note, what we're hearing is this mixolydian scale, because it's F mixolydian is the dominant of B flat major. So this is the moment where we're really close to that. And it's the feel that I was describing that we were sort of getting at the beginning. It's F major, but it can also be mixolydian. It becomes F major once you hear the final statement, which is here. So here is a cadence and establishes, defines keys. But at the beginning you have the ambiguity. And notice that texturally we had first monody, then chords, monody and chords. So this is like this sort of call and response way. And when we're moving already into section B, we have always, all the time, chords. So it's very dense. We have much more density than section A, because in section A, we had monody, and now there is no monody, always polyphony, always this tutti feel, always forte. And the only moment that we're approaching this monody is here. So this is monody in octaves. And then it's in quadruple octaves, right? So we have this 1, 2, 3, and 4 quadruple octaves, and it's also monody. So quadruple octaves, monody. Right? So that would be like the strongest statement, and clearly here we have a perfect cadence. So it's a 5 that goes to 1, and it's one that sounds in F major. Everything that's before that is F mixolydian, because you have the scale F, but it's, or you can view it as B flat major with the standing on the dominant, right? So melodically is that, but I would analyze it harmonically from the dominant point of view as we're moving there. So dominant, or let's better just stay in F, because previously I had all of these F. So these were BL passing chords. Let's view them. So we have seventh, that's the Mixolydian, a passing chord. It actually becomes there even a second degree, right? So that goes to the first and first inversion. That goes to a fourth. And then we have again first inversion, again fourth, and first inversion. So we can see this prolongation of F throughout, and then this is seventh again, second, and that goes to the root position, and then we have the second, and back to the same sequence. It's tonic here, that's some passing seventh and second, tonic and first inversion, fourth degree, then tonic first inversion, fourth degree, tonic and first inversion. This is seventh, goes to the second, tonic first inversion, second degree, tonic first inversion, second degree, tonic first inversion, and eventually the perfect cadence, right? So all of this is a prolongation of this F tonic, which is the F Mixolydian, but the tonic F is a dominant and B flat major. That's why we're talking of this standing on the dominant, because it's a prolongation of the dominant area. Now, where is the melodic repetition here? It's very interesting because it's basically highlighted by the pink motif. So you have something that starts here and then it starts halfway through, right? So here is the beginning. And then it starts again. And you would expect it yet a third time, but it's not happening. What you have is this, right? Which is a symmetrical phrase that's made of this short motif in the beginning and 3 notes in the outer passages. So this is a literal repetition, but shifted. And you might be wondering, well, this sounds familiar. I saw this technique by some composers, and I can tell you, well, you might have seen it in Stravinsky. Stravinsky in The Rite of Spring is playing with pentatonic scales. He has this folklorism. He is shifting the time signature and using these odd sets of notes. How many notes do we have here? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 9 that's crossing a 6 bar, and that's why we're getting this to be happening there. At the beginning, it's 11 notes that we're getting, because it's 5 plus 6, right? So very asymmetrical organization. And it's interesting to notice that the last time he is using these 11, he is not changing time signatures, but putting it just halfway through the bar. So here we have 9. Here we have a group of 9. Now this is a group of 3 plus 3 plus 1, which is 7. And from there we go to the 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And the ending phrase is 9 again. So very odd and asymmetrical numbers, 7, 9, 11, which also, I mean, are seen from the beginning. We can see here 11, that's also 11. Here when we're looking at this 6 plus 5, it's 11. This is also 11. So the beginning, it's made of 44 beats and 11, 11, 11. Very symmetrical. The next one is these 12. So this is 12, but then he makes them disruptive. So we have 12 that are having 5 with them. That makes 12, 5, 12. That's a symmetry, by the way. Very similar. This symmetry of 12, 5, 12 is symmetrical to 3, 1, 3. I see a very good parallelism with that. After this, also this phrase, I mean, is clearly 12, but then the continuation is 3, 3, and 3. It's 9. So it's shorter. And then you have the 9, 9, 7, which is 3-1-3. So what we're seeing is this very asymmetrical structure, and even within the beginning, we had these 3 beats that then go to 2. That's the asymmetry, and then 2 plus 4, right? So not very common in the sense of structuring a phrase in a traditional sense, but is very common in the sense that you would see in The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky, for instance. But we need to understand that this is a piece from the 70s, 19th century, 1870s, whereas Stravinsky is 1930s. So they're like over 40 years of difference between these two composers and pieces. But still, it's very modernistic and very, very fresh, and that's probably why it's still performing. It kind of became increasingly popular, and Ravel loved the piece and made this gorgeous orchestration of it. So here we are seeing also a very interesting passage, because this sequence is almost repeated identically, but first it sounds mixolydian, right? And it has this incomplete feel, it's mixolydian, but then you have it with a major, perfect authentic cadence in major. So first it's, and then it's. So that's what happened here. I think that all of this, when played, should be a build-up of tension and an extension of the dominant feel. And once we arrive to the F, it's a reiteration. You have several of these. Right, so in a way, that's repeated here again, and that repetition is already at the beginning of the section A prime. So let's now analyze A prime. A prime is very direct, because finally we are seeing everything in B flat major, not B major, B flat major. And in this case, B flat major is starting with this cadential feel. It's 4, 5, and then we start with the tonic inverted. And then we have the dominant, second inversion, tonic root position, dominant first inversion, and here we have the 6th degree. That's a little bit the interrupted cadence. Well, we had 6, but 6 goes to 2, 6 goes to the 2nd degree, and that 2 becomes a dominant of the dominant. So that's what we're having. It's a little bit stuck. Right, let me write it again. So it becomes dominant. This is dominant of the dominant, and that's the dominant. So that's a half cadence. We're basically having here a half cadence on F, which is of B flat major, B flat major. And finally, we have this scale, which was very characteristic. We had before these scales, so that's this pink motif. We can already highlight it, the pink motif of the scale. By the way, it's also here. All of this is the scale. Well, actually, it doesn't start there, it starts here. Right, and then, and the ending, it's the circle of fifths, right? Circle of fifths. We have G, C, F, B flat. So let's analyze this harmonically. We have tonic. Well, it's not tonic, 6th degree. It's the 6th degree. I'll put it from here. We have the 6th degree in first inversion. That goes to the dominant in first inversion. That's the 6th degree again. So a little bit of that Dorian feel. Then we have the dominant that goes to tonic. 6th degree that goes to the 2nd, and dominant to tonic. Probably that's the most conventional classical cadence that you can imagine, which is starting with the tonic, has a predominant function that is a circle of fifths. Also highlights a little bit this mixolydian sonority, but it's a perfect cadence. And after that, we directly move to this flat 6. And continue with B flat. So everything is connected. It's impossible to just analyze the piece and say, oh, this is where it ends. It says attacca, so it's like a preparatory section. But it's very surprising how much time Mussorgsky needed to delay all of this and to present the cadences, the perfect authentic cadence in the tonic. So the only perfect authentic cadence of B flat major is at the end of the piece. And I think this is quite remarkable because many composers would spend their cadences earlier and they would present them at a much earlier stage, right? So that would be pretty much the harmonic and motivic analysis. We were covering mostly the piece from this overview point of view. I think that clearly we can go much deeper and you could just explain every single bar and every single line, bass, and melody from a motivic analysis and really develop it further. I think this sets a good foundation, and let's kind of summarize the conclusions. So first conclusion is the usage of asymmetrical rhythms. Second one is the pentatonic scales, which can be in the key of origin or they can be in a transposition. Then we have the modality. We had Aeolian, we had Dorian. We had a little bit of this ambiguity of two modes that sounds jazzy. Right, so modes in general, like this mixolydian, are very great, and this is something that characterizes Mussorgsky's style. Then you have the alternation between monody and polyphony. I think this is one of the greatest examples. You present the theme alone, and then you have the harmonization. And the harmonization also, it's very interesting how he avoids the tonic, as I've just mentioned earlier. So he has the dominant, he has this chromatic mediant, which is D flat, and then we have a little bit of an extension of the dominant, and eventually we arrive to the tonic. So these are the harmonic features. Then there is also this interesting component of motivic movement, contrary motion, like that. And one of the most original techniques, which is this sequence where something starts, it's in the old key, and then we're like cutting it through, disrupting, and starting in a new key. So we had it here. And now and that creates probably one of the most dissonance connections because we're moving from this to this. Sounds very modern. So probably you could even take this to 12 keys and try to expand it and understand it from other perspectives, from C major, F major, and see how that harmonic change works. Then everything is also extremely coherent. So I think that the fact that we're having these motifs of the fourth and the third, I mean, the more I look into it, the more of fourths and thirds I see. I just wanted to highlight one last one here. This is fourth and a second, right? So we have this fourth and second. Right, so we have everything is based around that concept of fourth and third. And here it is as well. And the last feature is that this is a good example of a piece that's using only two main note values, or maybe three. The quarter note, the eighth note, and there are some half notes, but that's pretty much it. So the dotted rhythms that you see in between, they're just to sustain some notes. And it works extremely well. So why does it work? Because Mussorgsky knows where to place the rhythms so you don't predict the pattern. This piece could have become very predictable by just having this 5/4 and 6/4 unit always throughout, but he is specifically trying to contradict that rhythm and only presents it at the beginning 2 times, so you get used to it, and then everything is just a modulation and transformation and moving from one place to another, right? Also, it's a great example of ways that you can stack motifs together in order to create something. So you're like having this part, right? So that's one motif, and then it's this other one, which is the beginning, and we're going back to the previous. So that sort of movement back and forth across the bar, that's also a very important conclusion, is something that characterizes this piece. So that would be pretty much it. I hope you found it useful. I mean, it's just the beginning of a series. So the first thing that I would really love to know from you is if you would like me to analyze the whole suite. If that's going to be the case, I would really need to think about the format, because I won't be just pausing the channel for 10 weeks in order to cover every one of these. But if really the feedback is important, I'll take that in consideration and might actually do that. So without further ado, I just want to thank you all for watching, and particularly the patrons that are supporting this channel. If you find this useful, please consider doing that. On Patreon, you can basically find all of these scores in PDF and download them. And also the videos can be viewed without the ads that are popping in YouTube. So thanks for watching. I'm wishing you a productive week of composition, performance, study, listening, and see you next Saturday. Take care. Bye.